Modi, Vikram-1 launch defining moment for India, breaking the news.net. That single number resets the India playbook. The key question is not what happened, but what changes next for operators and users. We will map trigger, incentive shift, and downstream impact before the close. Today, that's no longer true. Prime Minister Modi just greenlit something most countries are still debating, and it's about to reshape how India competes in the trillion-dollar space economy. Vikram-1 is not a satellite. It's not a research probe. It's India's first privately built orbital rocket, and it just passed its critical test. What makes this moment significant isn't the rocket itself, it's what it signals about India's entire approach to space technology. For decades, ISRO controlled India's space ambitions almost exclusively. They launched satellites. They reached Mars. They built capabilities that made India a player on the global stage. But they also operated like a government monopoly. Long timelines. High costs. Limited competition. That model worked for national pride, but it couldn't scale fast enough for the commercial space economy that's moving at startup speed. Vikram-1 changes the equation. This is Skyroot Aerospace, a private Indian startup, building and launching orbital rockets. Not with ISRO's help, but in parallel to it. That's the real story. Modi didn't just approve one rocket launch. He approved India's transition from a government-controlled space program to an ecosystem where private companies can compete, fail, iterate, and succeed. Why does this matter? Because the global space market just hit an inflection point. SpaceX proved that private companies could out-innovate government programs. Companies like Rocket Lab, Relativity, and Axiom Space validated that specialization works. India watched. And now India's moving. Here's what changes. First, costs drop. ISRO's launch costs have been historically high because government programs operate on different economics. Private companies optimize for margin and iteration. Skyroot's stated goal is to reduce launch costs to under $5 million per mission. That's roughly 1/10 of what India was paying. For startups building satellites, for researchers, for companies wanting to test in space, suddenly India becomes accessible. Second, timelines accelerate. Government space programs measure success in 5-year plans. Skyroot operates in quarters. That's not just faster, it's a different competitive speed. When global customers need satellites launched in months, not years, speed becomes a differentiator. Third, and this is the part Modi emphasized, India's talent gets unleashed. The Indian engineering ecosystem has proven it can compete globally, in software, in manufacturing, in design. But space was cordoned off. Now it's open. Every engineer who left India to work for SpaceX, for Blue Origin, for Relativity, some of those people will return. Some will start companies. Some will accelerate what exists. But here's the contrarian angle nobody's discussing yet. This success depends entirely on one thing: regulatory speed. ISRO has to transform from a monopoly operator into a referee. They have to license launches, inspect safety, manage airspace, and do it at commercial speed. One bureaucratic delay, one rejected license, and the entire advantage evaporates. India's space regulator, the newly formed INSPACE framework, has to prove it can make decisions faster than traditional government bodies. That's the real test coming in the next 90 days. Second concern, global competition won't wait. SpaceX is launching 60 Starlinks every 2 weeks. Rocket Lab just completed a 50-mission backlog. Relativity is testing 3D printed rockets. India's entry is necessary, but it's also late. Skyroot needs to move from one successful test to commercial operations while the window of advantage in the global market is still open. Here's what to monitor. Watch launch frequency. If Skyroot conducts more than 2 operational launches in the next 12 months, the model is working. If they remain at 1 per year pace, they are still operating like a government program. Watch customer diversity. Are they only launching Indian satellites, or are they attracting international customers? Watch cost metrics. Do their actual launch prices match their stated targets, or do they creep upward once commercial pressure hits? For India specifically, this opens doors in satellite internet, Earth observation, and space manufacturing. Companies like Pixel, which builds microsatellites for climate and agriculture data, suddenly have local launch options. That changes their business model. Engineers in Bangalore stop building products for launch windows scheduled years out. They build for launch windows scheduled months out. That changes innovation speed. For global markets, India is now offering competition to SpaceX and Rocket Lab in the small to medium lift market. That drives prices down industry-wide. That accelerates deployment of satellite services to underserved regions. That creates redundancy in launch capacity, which makes space infrastructure more resilient. Modi's statement was deliberate. He called this a defining moment. Not because one rocket launched, but because it represents a decision. India is moving from state-controlled space exploration to market-driven space innovation. That's a policy shift. Policy shifts, when backed by execution, compound. The next signal to watch is customer announcements. If Skyroot signs 5 international launch contracts in the next quarter, the market has recognized the moment. If those contracts are at competitive pricing, the ecosystem is real. If regulatory approvals accelerate, if INSPACE approves licenses in weeks instead of months, momentum becomes unstoppable. This is worth following closely. Not because it's new technology, but because it's a template for how emerging economies can compete in high-tech sectors. You don't compete with monopolies. You build competitive ecosystems. You deregulate. You let private companies run faster than government bodies. And you measure success in quarters, not 5-year plans. Subscribe to Atlas Signal for daily intelligence on how policy, technology, and markets shift globally and locally. This is the kind of strategic move that compounds over time. India just approved its first privately built orbital rocket, and Modi called it a defining moment. Why? Because for decades, ISRO controlled India's entire space program. Now startups like Skyroot can launch commercially. That changes everything. Launch costs drop from $50 million to $5 million. Timelines collapse from years to months. Indian engineers stop leaving for SpaceX and start building companies at home. This isn't just one rocket. It's India's policy shift from government monopoly to competitive ecosystem. Watch launch frequency and customer diversity over the next 3 months. If Skyroot hits commercial velocity while regulators stay fast, India just entered the trillion-dollar space race.